Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from legal expert Michael Joseph. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and of course, I am here with New York personal injury attorney and legal expert Michael Joseph. Today, we're going to talk about rear end, lane change, and driveway accidents. Who's at fault in New York car crashes? Michael, welcome back. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So how is fault determined in a rear end car accident in New York? And is the rear driver always the one who's liable?
Pretty much, yeah, actually. One of the common questions we hear is, I got hit in the rear, can I sue? And the answer is usually yes, because New York law is very specific. New York law requires the rearmost driver to maintain a safe distance between you and the car in front of you. So if you're traveling behind somebody and you don't have a safe distance between yourself and them and the car in front of you and you hit them, you're basically at fault. Now, our car accident attorneys here in New York, we've heard every excuse in the book. Oh, I hit ice. The car in front of me stopped too fast. New York law says, hey, you're supposed to be able to, as the operator of the vehicle, account for unforeseen things. If the weather's bad, drive slower. Okay. Mm-hmm. If there's ice on the road and you know there's ice on the road, you have to take that into account in how you drive. So make adjustments, adjust your speed, leave more space between you and the vehicle in front of you. The only time really it becomes an issue of whether someone's at fault in a rear end collision is if the car in front swerved into the lane when it wasn't safe to do. So that's really the only time where you could say, all right, maybe you're not 100% at fault if you rear end somebody. But in almost every car accident case, it doesn't matter what your excuse is. If you rear end somebody, pretty much you're at fault for the accident. And, if you were the victim of a rear end collision, you can sue. Our New York car accident attorneys have won case after case after case, not even a trial, just on summary judgment by pointing out to the court, hey, this was a rear end collision. New York law, vehicle and traffic law, 1129, requires the following car, rear cars, to keep a safe distance between their car and the car in front of them. And on these cases, we win them hands down. So if you're the victim of a car accident in which you were rear-ended, the car that hit you is almost always at fault. The only exceptions really are if they claim you swerved into their lane and they didn't have enough time to make an adjustment, or if it's a multiple collision car accident where a lot of people rear-end each other, a chain collision. Usually it's the rearmost vehicle that's at fault, but other cars in the chain can also be at fault if they rear-ended somebody and then were rear-ended themselves.
It reminds me of, I'm a big hockey fan, and if you high stick somebody, you're going to get called for it no matter what as a penalty, because you have to be in control of your stick. Even if somebody else hits your stick and it hits someone in the face, it's still your fault because you have to be in control of your stick. So it kind of reminded me, what you were saying kind of reminded me of that. If you're behind, you have to understand the situation and you have to be in control of your vehicle.
Correct. There's not really a good excuse 90% of the time for a rear end collision. You have to be in control of your vehicle. And
right.
If things that are, and also you have to keep a proper lookout, right? So as you're driving, you have to be aware of your circumstances and be aware of what's happening. If you see construction up ahead, or cars slowing down up ahead, or an accident up ahead, you have to make adjustments. You have to slow down yourself. You have to take precautions for what you see in front of you. You have to be aware of your circumstances, be aware of what's happening while you're driving. And those are the very basic rules of the road.
Absolutely. So when it comes to a lane change car accident in New York traffic law, is it always the fault of the person who's going into the lane or not necessarily?
Almost always the person who's changing lane would be at fault in a collision where there's either a slide stoplight or a person changing lanes. A lot of times we'll see that two people are changing lanes and are each blaming each other for the accident when they're both coming into the same lane. Okay, that can be a little question of fact. But under New York's rules, the traffic rules, you have to maintain your lane of travel until and unless it's reasonably safe for you to make a lane change. And we hear it all the time. And we take depositions of the other drivers. He didn't let me in. He didn't let me merge. Well, guess what? If another person is in their lane of travel, they don't have an obligation to allow you to merge. It's your obligation as the vehicle that is changing lanes to change lanes only when it's safe to do so. So if you get hit by somebody and they say, "Oh, he didn't let me in," they may try to say you're at fault. Well, guess what? They're at fault for not waiting until it was reasonably safe for them to make the lane change.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I used to live in Chicago. I used to live in Chicago, and people don't like to let you in a lot of times. So you got to make sure that it's safe to do so.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you're the one in control. If you're merging into someone else's lane and you hit them, you're at fault. Every driver in New York, you have the right to expect that other drivers are going to follow the rules, even though most of them don't. You have the right to presume they're going to follow the rules, right? And so that you have a right just to keep going straight in your lane. So if someone kind of comes into your lane and they hit you, they're at fault. So if you're injured in a car accident where someone changed lanes and hit you, yes, you can sue. The other person that changed lanes is at fault for the accident.
Okay. Let's move on to driveways, parking lots, gas stations, that kind of stuff. If someone hits your car when pulling out of one of these, are they pretty automatically liable, or does it depend on the situation?
Well, it always depends on some part of the situation, but I would say with 90% certainty, whenever a car is coming out of a driveway or a gas station or a parking lot into another lane and they hit you, the car that's entering the roadway is usually okay. Mm-hmm. Because why? The New York rules of the road apply to all cars and vehicles being driven. And what the rules essentially say is that when you're entering the roadway from a different roadway or from a parking lot or an adjoining roadway or an uncontrolled intersection, the car that's entering the roadway has a duty to make sure it's safe for them to enter the roadway before they try doing it. And usually, if you enter a roadway and you hit somebody, that means it's kind of self-evident that it wasn't safe for you to do it at that time.
Right.
Because if it was safe to do so, you wouldn't hit them, right? So if you're involved in a car accident where you're going straight and someone's entering the roadway from either a driveway or a parking lot or whatever, or a gas station or a store, and they come into your lane and they hit you, yes, they're at fault. Even if they cut in front of you and there's not enough time to avoid hitting them, they're still at fault because they created the situation. They cut in front of you, and if another vehicle cuts in front of you, and there's so little time between when they cut in front of you and when you hit them and you T-bone them, they're still at fault because it wasn't reasonably safe for them to cut in front of you at that moment.
And what about shared fault in car crashes? How does that affect compensation? How do the courts handle it?
New York has one of the most liberal comparative fault statutes in the country. So
Really?
In general, if you're partially at fault and the other vehicle's partially at fault, let's say you're whatever, there's always 100% fault out there. So typically at the end of a case, a jury will be asked to assess the percentages of fault, okay? So if, for example, they say each party is 50-50, whatever you would be entitled to gets cut in half by 50%, or gets cut in half. So if, for example, the other car says, if a jury says, the other car was 90% at fault and you were 10% at fault, whatever money they award you for compensation, you're going to be able to recover 90% of that, or in other words, they take a reduction for your own comparative fault.
Okay. And so, just so I'm clear, you can still recover compensation even if you're partially at fault in a New York car accident, or no?
In New York, you can recover compensation even if you're majority at fault.
Okay.
So you see this a lot in cases. We've taken on some of these cases where you have very high damages. People are very significantly significant. But it's either 50-50 fault or they were even majority at fault. So they're entitled to 10 or 25 or 30%, even if they're 70% at fault. Unlike other laws where you have to prove that you're 51% at fault to win it all. In New York, you don't. In New York, if the other vehicle's at fault at all, you can recover, but it's only going to be a percentage of your damages. Now, is it worth it? Well, if you have $1 million worth of damages, even if the other party was only 10% at fault and you were 90% at fault, that's still $100,000.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of think about whether the injuries justify it, and what the likelihood or what the parameters of fault are. Because remember, in cases where it's not 100% clear who had what percentage of fault, different juries could view it differently. I usually say if you tried the case 10 different times, you may get 10 different results.
And we've talked about this before, but just in case somebody is coming into this, this is their first episode of our show that they're watching. In any of the accidents that we've talked about today, what is the best evidence that you want to collect to help prove fault in one of these accidents?
I would say the best witness in the world is a camera. What we're actually seeing now a lot of times is the Ubers or even the Teslas and some of the other cars have cameras in the cars that record the entire accident. So there's no dispute about what happened. Right. But if you don't have an accident, or I'm sorry, if you don't have a car where you're in an Uber or one of the Tesla or some car that has streaming and actively records what's happening, I would say before any car is moved, get out and take pictures because the camera is always the best witness of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Are you finding that more just, passenger cars, just people are getting dash cams more? Are you seeing that more often?
I'm seeing it more than I used to, definitely. Certain types of cars, they actually come standard, like the Tesla. So
Mm-hmm.
other times, people who work for Uber or who are on a road a lot or who work for Lyft, they also tend to have the cameras because they're on a road so often. They want to be able to document if an accident happens, whose fault it is. So I'm definitely seeing more than I used to dash cams, even with police vehicles that are involved in accidents. We're also starting to get dash cam videos from officers themselves, which is incredibly helpful. Being able to show what actually happened is incredibly useful because obviously when you get into litigation, people's stories change.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Even a witness that you get, that seems like a great witness. Memories fade, things can change in their lives where they don't maybe remember what's going on. So they're not necessarily 100% accurate.
Right. And I would even say, if you not only take pictures, but if you're ever able to get the other driver on camera, if you have a cell phone, you have to get the other driver on camera apologizing, admitting the accident was his fault, then they can't backtrack that later. The second most important thing is to call the police. Get a police report. Often people will make admissions to the police. Okay, yes, this is how it happened, and it's not uncommon for people once their insurance companies get involved to change the story. But once we have it locked in with the police officer's a witness who can always be called at a trial to see what, and you can ask the officer, what did this individual say happened when you talk to him right after the accident.
And how quickly should someone report an accident and seek medical attention in terms of protecting legal rights? What could go wrong if you wait too long?
Well, certainly you want to report the accident. Certain types of accidents have to be reported right away. For example, if you have a situation where you're hit by an uninsured driver or a driver that fled the scene, you have to be able to prove that you reported the accident within 24 hours to the police.
Mm-hmm.
Now, certainly, you also want to get a police report if you can. If it's an accident where you think you may be injured, always get a police report because you want to document how the accident happened. You want to be able to have the information of the other driver, right, and who they are. Also, in certain cases, like for example, if you're a bicyclist, right, or a pedestrian, you'll never know who the driver is unless you get a police report and who their insurance is. Because if you're a pedestrian that's hit by a car, or you're a bicyclist that's hit by the car, in that case, you have to go through the insurance of the car that hit you for medical benefits. And if you don't get an application within 30 days, you're not getting medical benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's even in some of the case law that gaps in treatment are problematic, if not fatal, to certain cases. So if you're injured, if you try and tough it out, you try and stay at home, you just take some Tylenol and try and tough it out and wait for it to get better and it doesn't, and a couple of weeks go by, all of a sudden, the insurance companies are going to turn around and say, oh, you were fine for 2 weeks. The accident didn't cause the injuries, because if the accident caused injuries, you would have went to the hospital. You would have sought medical treatment. So it's really important to have a doctor, shortly after the accident, be able to document signs of an injury. What hurts? Where does it hurt? Are you having difficulty performing certain maneuvers? Are there objective evidence of an injury such as spasms? Without the doctor's record showing the problems you're having, you're 2 steps behind in trying to prove that the injury was contemporaneous and that the injury is from this accident, because the insurance companies are almost always going to have their doctors say, no, it's not from this, or it's because of your age. The insurance companies have doctors after doctors after doctors lined up to testify against you. Right. So if you don't have proof that these injuries are from that, what when the injury is, to be able to sue for any kind of injury, it has to be objectively verified and diagnosed by a medical professional, right? So just saying, ow, it hurts, doesn't get you anywhere.
Right, yeah. When it comes to, situations like a lane change accident or some of the stuff that we've talked about, where the evidence is minimal, you don't have dash cams, you don't have a lot of stuff, and it's a he said, she said situation. How difficult does it become to try to figure out who's at fault? I could see that being hard, huh?
Juries every day have to make decisions, right? And if it does become more difficult if you don't have the evidence behind you. That being said, what people who are involved in an accident say is evidence, right? So if you say it happened one way, it now is the burden shifts to the other party to be able to say it happened a different way. And usually, when there's damage photos taken or property damage claim made, we can also get those photographs from the property damage files. So we do have the ability to some extent to recreate how the accident happened. If a defendant says it happened one way, and we get photographs showing impact damage that shows it really happened the way our client says it happens, yes, we can still recreate the accident. We can still prove the case. But every personal injury lawyer who handles car accident cases likes to have the most evidence we can have to prove the case.
How often do they go to a jury trial, roughly?
In all honesty, not very often. I'd probably say 90% of cases do settle, especially with car accidents. Our personal injury attorneys in New York are pretty aggressive. So if it looks like a case isn't going to settle, we'll often make motions for summary judgment where we present evidence to the court and ask the court to make a determination before it even gets to a jury trial. That way we're already one step ahead of the game. And the benefit of doing that is that once we win, interest starts to accrue at 9% under New York law. So that definitely creates an impetus for insurance companies to want to settle, because they know if they get hit with a verdict, now they're not only paying the verdict, they're paying 9% interest from the day we won summary judgment.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
that can be motivating, huh?
Well, it helps move things along.
Yeah, for sure.
Because obviously insurance companies have a motive to delay. They want to delay, deny, dispute. And the sooner our New York personal injury lawyers who do car accident cases try to take away their tools. We want to win the fight before it even gets to a jury.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to Trial Talk with attorney Michael Joseph. Visit newyorktriallawyers.org to schedule a consultation and protect your rights. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, share it. We love having you be part of our community here. We got lots more stuff coming your way. Michael, always great chatting with you. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.